Welcome to episode 59 of Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. What does it take to lead in one of the most diverse, complex and dynamic environments in the world? My guest today is Anna Mittelman, head of the European School of Administration. Anna shares her journey from HR professional to leading the EU's interinstitutional training hub, the European School of Administration. During our conversation, we addressed topics such as how decentralized leadership fosters innovation and collaboration, why learning to unlearn is a critical skill in the fast-changing world of work, and the transformative power of job shadowing and how it bridges talent gaps across many parts of an organization. So, without further ado, let's hear what Anna has to say. Anna Mittelman, welcome to Leading People.
Hi, Jerry. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, you're the head of what's known as the European School of Administration at the European Union, or as affectionately known, the EU. And we'll get to that bit shortly. But first, so our listeners can get to know a little bit about you and get to know you better. How did you get here today? What is person, place, or an event, or something stands out in your journey, or an epiphany moment? And why did you end up then choosing a career in L&D, or did it choose you? And today you end up as head of what in the corporate world would be probably considered a corporate university because it serves the needs of a lot of people in the EU. So let's find out a little bit more about Anna.
That's a lot of questions in one there, Jerry. Epiphany moment, no, I don't think I had that actually. But I've worked in HR for many, many years, a big part of my professional life. And in that, for me, learning and development really is the most forward-looking and most exciting bit of it. So I was doing that at the Committee of the Regions, which is, for those of you who do not know EU so well, is a consultative body giving advice on any legislation that has a local or regional dimension to it. So I was working in HR there, before that, different fields, in learning and development, and interinstitutionally, I was participating in this fantastic network across the institutions, with all people responsible for training and for learning and development. It was such a vibrant community. We met maybe every 2 months or so. It was really the cherry on the cake. When you came away from there, having exchanged, came back with insights. A position there came up, and I'd been in that for quite some time, and it was natural for me to apply, and here I am.
Right. Okay. So you had this quite a deep experience working in one aspect of the EU. And for those out there, the EU does have this really fantastic body which represents the interests of the regions. It's not just all top-down stuff, but they listen to what different parts of different countries have to say in that. And it's a very dynamic place, I believe. And I met you first, actually, when you were working in that role. And then the European School of Administration. So I'm sure that our listeners are quite curious to learn a bit more about what is this European School of Administration, and maybe when you're, maybe you can say some words about it, and what's its aim and purpose, and what's your mission, and as you go along, maybe enlighten our listeners a little bit on some of the terminology that's used in the European institutions. That may not be so familiar to people in the corporate world, because it is a pretty well-oiled machine, if you use that corporate term. It has very clear ways of functioning and very specific ways of getting things done. So maybe I'll let you enlighten our listeners.
Okay, well, yeah. So each institution of the European Union would have typically its own learning and development service or department. But interinstitutionally, this school was created kind of, as you were saying, a corporate university. If you can say that the corporate and public is perhaps a slightly contradictory term, but nevertheless, indeed, a sort of corporate university for staff and managers working for the institutions. So that would be aligning all the policies in terms of training and the activities, the actual training programs between the institutions in the area of leadership, in the area of induction, and it was also established to organize internal talent management program called certification.
On Leading People, the goal is to bring you cutting-edge thought leadership from many of the leading thinkers and practitioners in leadership today. Each guest shares their insights, wisdom, and practical advice so we can all get better at bringing out the best in ourselves and others. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share a link with friends, family, and colleagues. And stay informed by joining our Leading People LinkedIn community of HR leaders and talent professionals.
In terms of the leadership, which I think we're mostly here to talk about today, which is a really, really exciting area, there we provide training programs, and it's also part of our mandate to promote good, healthy, sustainable leadership culture across the institutions, and that's massive, obviously. Mm-hmm. So if we can attain that, that's great. So we work very, very closely with all the institutions. We are not really here for our own. We don't have a purpose really on our own. We are here to deliver for the institutions. So really at the service of all the institutions. Mm-hmm.
And what does the school do then that the various institutions were not doing in their own HR field? What is that little extra thing that you bring as a school? Because it's a kind of transversal, isn't it? Because you go right across all the different types of institutions, from the Commission to the Council to the Parliament, etc.
Absolutely. Well, it's the only kind of place, it was at least, the only place, and that's what made it the cherry on the cake and so cool, is that it's the only place that would have its own internal training designers. So there's a lot of creativity. It brought and recruited and attained lots of people who you would otherwise perhaps not really see in the institution's own training departments, though they work there as well. But there is a really high concentration of highly creative people working here, really precisely to design the own the training programs, with the whole idea that is done at interinstitutional level. We do that together with our stakeholders from the other institutions, and then they can run similar projects on their side, but we have designed them together.
Mm-hmm. And before we get into the specifics of the leadership aspect, what does this do then for the whole idea of talent development and career progression within the overall sphere of the EU institutions?
Well, each institution would have its own policy on succession, on talent development, etc. Knowing that there are about altogether, there'd be 60,000 people working for all the institutions in all the countries of the world. So that's massive. Obviously, with our 22 people, we are not reaching out to all of those. It's not only on our responsibility, but in terms of designing those programs, some of them are a prerequisite in the institutions to apply for a management position, for example.
Okay. So one of the challenges that I'm sure every L&D person listening to this, and they may be curious about how you deal with it, is this idea of how do you go beyond that 10% of the L&D effort that comes from the classroom, the 70-20-10 rule that's out there. How do you now approach that? And what have you been learning so far? Because I think you took up this position, was it last year or the year before?
That's right, last year.
So you're bringing a sort of, you're coming in possibly with some fresh perspective, particularly coming in from one of the other institutions, and you're bringing that in there. So how's that going in terms of looking at that 70-20-10 equation?
Is everyone aware of the 70-20-10 listening to this pod? I suppose so. But just a quick recap, perhaps. Shall I?
Yes, of course. That's what we're here. We're all here to learn,
So it's kind of a known fact, I suppose, that about 70% of what people learn at work, they actually learn at work. So how they develop after having been recruited over the years that they stay, they learn at work. 20 of that, and that's really working on everyday work, going to meetings, chatting to colleagues, stuff like that. 20% of the continuous learning comes from slightly more targeted activities such as conferences and that type of learning and culture, and only 10% actually is what we are doing, the traditional training courses. So yeah, good question, because basically what we want to do is to expand that 10% to reach the potential 70% to go into that mode, because that's where people learn the most, when you are active at work. So one project that we've been that I'm particularly happy about, I have to say, it's an interinstitutional job shadowing initiative, which in fact came with me from my previous job, where we had taken this initiative as a very small institution. Mind you, the Committee of the Regions is, we were not really, we're not playing with a big fish there, but it was a great initiative that came, that we were running, and we did it bilaterally with the other institutions. The whole idea of that was really to get people out of their own institution, focus on light, unbureaucratic, really linking them up with others of choice. To expand their networks, get to know how they were doing things, exchange knowledge, exchange ideas, etc. So we were running that from the Committee of the Regions side, but we were tiny. I had a very, very small training team. So we thought, wouldn't it be clever if we presented this at interinstitutional level, and then we kind of give over the project? And what would be better than the European School of Administration taking the whole logistics over? And then we didn't have to bother with it. However, little did I know at the time, obviously, that I would be heading the school 3 years later. And now I shouldn't say stuck with the project, because I'm delightedly stuck with this project. It has really taken off. And I think key to success in that respect has really been that we have focused so much on a light process, cost-free, unbureaucratic, as little administration as we possibly can. So the whole thing, having been really linking up people across institutions on their terms. Only it could be a couple of meetings, it could be following projects, it could be participating in the unit meetings, but really getting to know other people in other institutions, because we are all, you may be working for the Parliament, the Council, the Commission, whatever, but we are all working for the EU with the same purpose and with the same mission.
The same values.
Same values, yes. Indeed.
And tell me, what is it that seems to be appealing based on the feedback you've started to receive on this? What is it people are saying about this job shadowing that appeals to them so much?
The appealing part, it's all about people, It's really linking people up, like-minded people working perhaps on similar projects, but seeing it from a completely different side. People are so exciting. When we do this launch, the kickoff for it, we have hundreds of people there just for an hour or two, but it's very buzzy. And we get people linking up, so guests and hosts, very easily. It's like speed dating in a way. And then they take the job shadowing to levels that they wish. But what they take out of it really is getting to know people, networking, opening up their minds, their eyes on similar work to what they do themselves, but from a different perspective. It also opens up career possibilities, potentially, inspiration, motivation, also feeling that you're part of something which is bigger than just your own unit or your own directorate.
And maybe some of our listeners are wondering how this would relate to the concept of mentoring.
Mentoring, not necessarily. We often link up. People are interested often in following colleagues at the same level, I would say. It's not so much on a mentoring program type.
Okay, so it allows for people to look at moving into jobs where even if they will stay as independent contributors, right? For example, that they could still see opportunities to grow and develop themselves, their skills, their knowledge, etc. By just sampling this job shadowing, is that how it kind of works? And they see and hear and feel what it's like to be part of maybe another DG or part of another unit or whatever, and understand better.
Exactly.
Okay.
You asked me before to go in a little bit to about the structures of the institutions, and the institutions are typically there is kind of a common structure, and then slightly the terminology change between. But you would have Director General covering a couple of directorates. Each directorate has a couple of units. Each unit has a couple of sectors. That's kind of the traditional structure of an institution. At the head of that, you would have a Director General, Deputy Director General, Director, Head of Unit, Head of Sector. So that's a very traditional kind of style, which, you know, we may get out of sometime in the future. I am, for example, at the school, we try to be a little bit less traditional than that. We're working with project teams, a little bit flatter organization, but typically that's how otherwise it's structured.
Yeah, and you are a head of unit in that schema.
Exactly. So I'm head of the school, but indeed, very structurally, that is a head of unit post.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of nice things that the 70-20-10, I'd like to come back a little bit to that goal and talk a little bit in a few minutes about that, and also maybe your role as head of unit. But before that, this segues nicely into maybe you could say something about your own leadership style and how you as a manager live what you preach. And I mean, you even told me recently, if you're prepared to talk about it, fascinating story about how you chose to work with your deputy head of unit and how that evolved. And I personally was really touched by it. And maybe this is something that our listeners would be interested in hearing. But let's start with your own approach to leadership.
Yeah, absolutely, with pleasure. I think it's important in general not to overcomplicate matters, not to overburden in terms of matrices and that kind of rather old way of leading nowadays, but really there's beauty in clarity, there's beauty in simplicity. I'm very much for clear communication in general. I very much, we will go into that, indeed, this decentralized leadership style, which I think is the only way to lead, as we are overburdened with work, few resources. There is no point just relying on yourself. You have to use the team to its absolute maximum capacity. So yes, decentralized leadership, I think, and that in itself really creates that the ownership and the enthusiasm and the engagement that you want your team and your team members to have. And by doing that, really creates, that term of type of engagement that you really want to see. And when you do delegate the work like that, you typically also do see commitment, and that's not just commitment to the work as such. That's commitment to people's own learning as well.
Coming up, Anna dives into her innovative co-leadership approach, the importance of purpose-driven leadership, and how learning to unlearn is reshaping talent development at the EU. So stay tuned for more actionable insights that you can apply in your organization.
When I started at the school, indeed, I established co-leadership with my deputy, whereby we share the pleasures and the burden of leading the school fully. There's plenty of interesting benefits in doing that. It has, not only do you have someone to run all decisions by, we can brainstorm together, we can discuss the bigger vision. We can discuss the small stuff. It gives you an opportunity to really look at something, a daily situation, a scenario, a project, whatever, from a different perspective. I'm very lucky to have someone who is extremely professional. I would say we complement each other very well, which is nice because, you get two people doing the one job. And not only is it handy and practical and beneficial, it's also just practically great. In my absence, I am replaced by someone who will do the job as good as I do. And it's just a pure joy as well to share work with someone.
One of my previous guests from a couple of years back, Perry Timms, talked about distributed leadership, and he was more or less getting at this same thing. You need to allow the leadership to be distributed where it's needed. Now, the one thing that some people out there may already have thought about is, how did you deal with the mindset aspect of letting go of control? Because this is a thing I guess a lot of managers grapple with. There is this kind of concept to be in control, you actually have to be prepared to give it up. But how do you deal with that? Because in some ways people might be going, my God, does she just trust everybody and just let them go on and get things done? And how come she's smiling and it's all working so well? But how did you deal with that aspect that some people might grapple with, more traditional managers might grapple with out there?
It's funny you should say it like that. Someone was describing it as organized hippie. And I suppose it's not actually that at all. Decentralized leadership or delegated, both in co-leadership and shared leadership, is very clear that I think the role of the manager or the leader is to create that clarity. And in projects, everyone has its own very specific role. Of course, as a manager, you check in as well. But honestly, if you have a good team and people are recruited to do, hopefully you have done the recruitment right. I mean, a good leader has to do two things well, I think. That's recruit well and help people grow well. And if you do that, the people that you have working in the various teams, they will do stuff that you are never able to do unless you trusted them to do that. I think it was Steve Jobs who said A leaders recruit AAA people and B leaders recruit C people. Yeah. And I think there is something very clever in that. You would want to surround yourself by people who are more clever, more innovative, has brighter ideas perhaps than yourself. Like, it's not your role as a leader or manager to always be the one who are exploding with great ideas and projects. People are recruited to do that. That's often their jobs. You have to sit in meetings. But really to trust your people to do that. And yes, so your question was, how do you do that? How do I let go of that control? I have never been a controlling person. So I could imagine that it would have been difficult if you were a more traditional type to indeed micromanage. I've never done that ever. I've had a couple of managers who did that, and it's very easy to pinpoint what you don't like in managers, and a little bit less difficult or less easy to pinpoint what good managers do well. But I think the micromanagement part is something you should really stay away from. The controlling, the micromanagement, because you will always put a limit to the performance and to the success of your team. Whereas if you let people in a controlled environment with clarity be there in the beginning, obviously you discuss together, where are we going with this project? How are we doing that? And then you have to let go. You have to let go. And then check in every now and then. Obviously, you're there. I think my role is very much remove obstacles, remove barriers so that they can perform.
Yeah. It's fascinating because, I've had over the years the privilege of, spending time and talking to and interviewing CEOs and very senior people. And the ones who are really successful have, that Chinese proverb, which is, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. The ones that it takes an inner confidence to be able to say, I'm going to surround myself with amazing talent because my job is to draw out the best in those people. And if I'm able to do that, they will follow me because they will feel inspired and engaged by just me giving them the clarity and the vision they need to do good work.
Yeah, well, that's that. Exactly. And part of your job is indeed to walk the talk. You know, we are at the European School of Administration. Part of our mandate is to create good leadership cultures across the institutions. I want to do that. I want to mirror that at the school, which is why we have co-leadership. We have leadership shared among the colleagues. We don't have, for example, these traditional sectors with heads of sectors. It's completely flat, as flat as it can be in a rigid structure. You know, we are still the European Commission, but in that, practically, we have project teams and the way that we run them. I have also learned a massive amount since I took up the function, because the people working there are really, really great at that. And they have also been kind of adopting this way of working for much longer than I have been there. So it's also something that I have modeled and have kind of taken on and continued to cultivate since I arrived.
Okay. So this is a nice segue into trying to now link the two together. So how is your own experience and your own leadership style influencing the direction you're giving to the school going forward in terms of how you're trying to shape leadership programs and what you call promoting good leadership?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, actually, because as I said before, a lot of people have a lot of things to say about bad leadership, bad management. You know, you look on LinkedIn, and you know, there is a masses about that there. Having said that, what is good leadership? Actually, it's a conversation that obviously we have had at the school, and my colleagues have gone about identifying behaviors that we think are linked to good and healthy and sustainable leadership. So what is it that we want to see in a manager? And what is it that we want to cultivate to kind of distill the essence of good leadership that we want to put in as components in our leadership programs?
And are you prepared to share a little bit what's emerging from that, those conversations? Yeah,
absolutely. And also to say, this is nothing that we would kind of want to export as a recipe for great leadership, but it is really just about identifying components that we want to have in our leadership programs. Not all in the one, but, you know, in our outreach altogether, those aspects should be in there. So yes, we work for the European Union. Everyone who benefits and who goes and participates in our courses work for the EU. So purpose-driven and mission-driven leadership is very much at the core of what we want in our leadership programs. So that's collectively, what is it? What is Europe? What does Europe mean for you? So I'm talking now about leadership competencies and inspiration. So going back to really looking at yourself and why did you start working for the EU? What does it mean? How does that drive you? How do you contribute to it? It's the collective history. Typically, anyone in any unit you would work in the EU, you know, you could have 20 people from 20 different countries speaking 20 different languages, different religions, different historical background, different political background, etc. So you have to have a very open mindset to tap into that. And so that diversity, building inclusive teams, for example, comes in there a lot. So going back to European history, European values, what does it mean to you? So that purpose-driven part is very important. Human qualities, of course, of compassion, integrity, trust, responsibility, humor, humility, all those kind of things. It's also about cultivating a way of nurturing responsibility, sense of initiative, accountability in your people. To have that, how do you do that whilst still being inspiring?
Yes.
You want people to take ownership. How do you do that? And how far do you go in that? So really nurturing that drive in people, nurturing entrepreneurship, allowing people, wanting people to grow, and helping in that. Those are very important components. Giving clarity, structure, yet within that, giving a space for people to take their own initiative, being innovative, and to push innovation. Another one, kind of looking to the future proactively, not just reacting to what's happening in the future, but actually wanting to go out there and actively drive that change that is needed.
Yeah. And I suppose my experience has been, if you had something called a cultural density index and you applied it to that sort of 2 or 3 square kilometers of Brussels, it's probably
up at 98%.
Yeah, it's probably the richest cultural density index in the world. People talk about international cities and that, but some places like London, international, but everybody speaks English, right? And you don't get by if you don't. And no disrespect to London, I lived there myself. But there's this kind of dynamic that you get when you walk into a room, and I do it quite a bit, a richness of perspectives, a tolerance of a lot of things. That people who have this probably mythological view of the EU as some kind of behemoth institute sort of thing. They miss this dynamic that's inside. And when you talk about innovation, one thing that strikes me is these EU officials have to be able to understand and anticipate emerging trends in society like nobody else has to be able to do it. They have to be able to get their heads around stuff when things are changing at an awful pace out there. And then they have to figure out, how does that create value for the people in Europe in such a way that the majority of people can benefit from it, and we can put in policies and legislation that help. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. That's what, in the end, it all comes down to. How does this benefit EU citizens? That is, to a certain extent, exactly what everyone everywhere in the institutions are contributing to. And it is your role as a manager, as a leader, to make sure that your people know just how to do that and where they fit in, and that they are equally important in that puzzle.
Yeah. Okay, so looking ahead, as we now are, a couple of interesting topics for our listeners here. The first one that occurs to me is, what are some of the biggest challenges going forward in running the school and keeping it relevant to the needs of the European institutions, given the pace of change in society? What are some of the things that you're looking at and saying, oh, these are challenging things, we have to be able to try and overcome these over the next few years, from the school's perspective in terms of educating and developing the leadership of tomorrow?
We have, perhaps not everyone listening to the podcast, but probably those in Europe may know that there is a shift in the Commission. So that's kind of the engine of the EU machinery as such. There's a shift. The president, so the top is staying, but she has then now appointed the commissioners. The commissioners will come with new priorities, and those priorities are obviously there to achieve the goals set out. And our training has to contribute to helping our staff and our managers to reach those priorities. I mean, we all know globally what's out there as a challenge. And as an opportunity. There is the technological development. We have AI coming. How do we deal with that? What are we doing with it? How are we helping people working in the EU, both managers and staff in general, to go about that and benefit from it? But with the link to that is obviously the cybersecurity aspects to it. There's the geopolitical shifts, which means also there's, we function on a budget.
Yes.
So quite concretely,
Yes.
how will the member state want to continue finance the EU? I mean, I think that is something that is out there. It should be out there. We have to have an added value.
Yes.
Obviously, that will be something that we have to deal with most probably, and this has been the case for the last 10 years as well. Each department, Directorate General in the EU, all the institutions have over the last 10, 20 years have to deal with ever increasing resources. Mm-hmm. So how can we balance that up with potentially higher demand? Those kind of things I would say are out there.
Yeah. And I suppose the two major parts of the institutions create a sort of natural cycle when the Commission changes every 5 years and the Parliament re-elects itself. So these are kind of natural things that can be anticipated, but they tend to bring new developments, don't they? They tend to bring quite new. And now you will retain the Commission. Van der Leyen will stay as head of the European Commission. However, when you have a change at the top, that even brings probably more change. So you've not only got societal changes, you've got the more internal political aspects to take into account, and then at the national level, you have changes in governments, etc. So it's quite a fluid environment, isn't it, for officials to constantly have to navigate these waters?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I find learning and development being such a it is kind of the only tool that you have to allow people to grow, take on new responsibilities, learn new stuff. I mean, you can't recruit new people every time there is a change in software, every time there's a change in political priorities, every time there is a pandemic and you're sent home for 2 years. You have the people that you have. And what do you do with that? You have to recruit people who have a mindset to grow, and you have to, or ideally leaders will want to invest in that, which is why, I find L&D really the most kind of forward-looking part of HR policies. You have to. It's a tricky thing and challenging for the future, perhaps more so than it has been in the past, with very fast technological developments in research, in policies, both all kinds in all sectors. Whereby you have to not only learn new things, but you actually have to unlearn what you learned before. Yeah. And that kind of cycle has probably always been there, but it's very prominent now because the development is so fast.
So just bringing together, taking that another step forward and bringing together what you mentioned about AI and the pandemic, I have a question for you as we get towards the end of the conversation. How are you approaching the digitalization of learning, the whole hybrid asynchronous delivery, the generational preferences around learning and how people receive content, attention spans, etc., etc. How are you as a school? What are you doing to look at that and make that relevant? And this goes back again to 70-20-10. You see, so I'm linking back to that. So how do you now maybe harness those technologies to maybe change that equation, the 70-20-10 equation? What are some of the current type of things that you're starting to explore and look at?
Interesting. Indeed, of course, we all know that the pandemic just caused and also created a great momentum for change there in terms of blended learning opportunities. Before, I think up till 2015, 2016, 17, perhaps, e-learning was the great, the cool kid on the block. And then we're all sent home, realizing everyone has to be able to work, function asynchronously, indeed. In terms of the patience for learning, we have changed quite dramatically over the last couple of years, in the sense that we used to have programs before spanning over maybe 2 days, 3 days. We can't do that anymore. People do not have either the attention span or opportunities to be away from from work simply for such a long time. However, with that comes also the good realization that what you do in a short time period, it's better to do repeatedly so that what you have learned is also something you can apply at work. So we more and more invest in training parts rather than a one-shot training. So training parts that would typically span over maybe 6 months. You would have a couple of blended learning sessions there, a couple of face-to-face, some reading that you do by yourself, maybe bilateral discussions at work to really have that set. So really, in that sense of maximizing your cognitive capacity, using different types of modes of learning. I don't know if that responds to your question.
Yeah, I mean it's just a fascinating area, having also been on the one end of it where you know I remember the panic that set in around COVID, and you mentioned the CTP program, which basically it was almost going to be cancelled, which is a fantastic talent program. And we had situations where some trainers, with no disrespect to them, could hardly open Zoom even, you know. They never had to do things in that way. And we all had to learn extremely quickly. And I remember trainer sessions where every so often the trainer would put up the hand and say, I found this new tool, or I found this new way, this new function. And the amount of sharing and you know, was, but the thing that if we go back to the neuroscience on this, and you know, as you know, I've studied neuroscience, and I've also studied learning transfer into the workplace, and I got certified in this. And one of the things that this it emerges from this technology and the whole way of working is this ability to chunk learning into smaller portions but do what you said, which is the repetition thing. And like when you learn to play the piano, the advice is to practice 15 minutes every day rather than 1 hour before the lesson. And I've been a pupil and a music teacher in my past, and that tends to work. If you practice for an hour before the lesson, you tend to walk in there and mess it up. But if you've practiced every day for 15, 20 minutes, it tends to embed those neural networks that help you. And I think we're seeing that happening now in the way learning is being designed and delivered.
Absolutely. There's a lot more of those learning pills, but I have to say, though, I fully agree. And you're the neurolinguist expert, not me, but there is also something, however, with at a workplace work coming in between. You just don't do the 10 minutes a day or the 10 minutes a week, because, you know, back reality at work responsibilities take over and people don't necessarily engage in it. So all of that, you know, you have to, as a professional training center, you have to really look, I think, also being just realistic about it, to see how much and what are people prepared to do to learn, what suits them, and then try to provide the training on, you know, any device, anytime, anywhere. But not to forget either the face-to-face, not to forget the presential learning, because the meeting with other people, and for us as European School of Administration, I would say that one of the added values of our courses is also that we bring together people from all the different institutions. And that in itself is hugely valuable. And you don't really get that online. So I think it has absolutely its place, but it is important also to bring people together and to benefit from that.
Yeah. I mean, the whole discussion about online versus in person, etc. It's not an either or discussion. It's a both and thing where, you know, as you say, there are certain types of trainings where you really want people to be able to see each other, to experience each other, and to do some exercises and drills together where they literally, you can see a transformation after 20 minutes of working together on something. And online often doesn't give you perhaps that type of thing, whereas online can do other things. And it's just finding that balance, I think, which is the challenge.
Which I think we have done now. I mean, you were referring to the first weeks and first months following the pandemic when people were sent home. That was a struggle to see, you know, all these 1 million breakout rooms that we were all in. But I think our enthusiasm and excitement were contained after a while, and we managed to put together, I think, all of us, I'm not speaking about us, but training providers in general, manage to find that right balance quite quickly. However, may I just say, what remains difficult, I think, is the hybrid. It's one thing to do things physically, face-to-face, to meet, that's easy. Doing it online is also easy, but the hybrid remains very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, my experience.
Invested a lot in it. Yeah. We've invested a lot in it, and I have part of my team in Luxembourg. So just for the school, we are based in Brussels, and we have a small team in Luxembourg. So all of our meetings are always hybrid. We have people in the office, and then we're always having part of them. So whatever we do, it's always hybrid, and it remains a challenge, to always make sure that people are included, that they contribute at their best. So for a meeting, that's contained, but to do that well in a training program, that remains a challenge.
The training is the really challenge. I mean, meetings, we know the dynamic there. It is, you have to remember to. But if you've got a big enough screen in the room facing everybody, it's a little bit easier. In a training context, and we had this in the past, where I remember we went back into the classroom, but some people got COVID, so they had to stay in the training, but they would come in over Teams or something, and it's so easy to forget them because the screen tends to be off to the side or behind you. And what impressed me, I mean, as a trainer, it's very easy to forget them, and then they can't follow all the back and forth, the conversation. What really impressed me, though, was when it came to doing breakouts, how inventive the people in the room were to include their colleagues who had to come in online. They immediately went into setting up Teams rooms, dialing in, or WhatsApp groups, whatever it was, so that they could actually sit together, put headphones on or whatever, and have the necessary interaction. So it's interesting. We have this expression in Irish, which translates into something, I suppose, is a popular term in English, which is necessity is the mother of invention, and you see how incredibly creative people can be about their own learning when a situation arises. So it's I suppose what it's like is it's an evolving. We're not going to be static on this. This is going to continue to evolve. Personally, I'm constantly looking for new tools to make any digital or online experience more meaningful, more impactful for the people who have to go through the learning part of it, not just my own delivery of it. So I think we're going to continue to evolve in this way. Now, coming to the end, and I'm just curious, when you think of all your experience and the work you're doing at the school and that, what sort of, would there be 3 tips you could leave our listeners with on how to go about leading people in the future? I'm just thinking back to some of the stuff you mentioned about micromanagement and that, and how it doesn't help sometimes. But have you got 3 tips that you could say, here's 3 things that if you're not doing them today, you should probably at least experiment with them, that might help you become a better leader in the future?
Yeah, I think, I mean, just to ground it, saying that I think good leadership is universal. I think some leadership skills are universal and they stay over time. So life in the future is not going to be drastically different, probably, compared to what they are today in that respect. I mean, I think if you have a good leader today, there's high chances that that same leader is great also in 50 years. So just as a starting point. But decentralize, really make sure that you use the potential of your team. I think part of being a good leader is provide inspiration, but really be there to unleash potential. It sounds like a cliche, but it is that. Make sure that whatever that person can do to perform, to develop, to grow, to innovate, support that, remove obstacles, make sure that each and every person performs at his or her best, and also really support the growing in people. People are not driven. You ask 10 random people what they are most motivated by at work. It is not salary, it's not the company car, it's not these kind of things, it's the intrinsic motivation, and in that lies the desire to learn and grow. So really use that bit, invest in that. I think that is the best for myself and for others to never forget that kind of tip. Desire probably for the future, a desire to embrace trends, new trends, changes, and not be reactive to it, but really be proactive about it. Is probably something that leaders of the future should have or should do. And then, indeed, decentralized leadership, insofar as possible. Try to break down those structures that are there. Try to challenge those and see if it is possible to work in a flatter organization, because that in itself will generate so many benefits.
And for any L&D professionals out there, are there any sort of insights you'd like them to take away from your experience in the L&D field? Because you have a huge depth of experience in it over the years. So is there anything you'd say to L&D professionals to go about all this great stuff you said about decentralizing the leadership, bringing out the best in people and that? What can L&D people continue to do or work on improving?
I think something for L&Ds to look at is indeed perhaps investing in that kind of competency of learning to learn. How do people learn? How can we improve that skill or that aptitude or that capacity in people to learn? It's about triggering their cognitive activity. It's about increasing their memory. It's about inciting or stimulating their curiosity to learn, and then to apply that back at the workplace as soon as possible. But that attention to increase the will to learn and the capacity to learn is a good investment, I think. Okay,
and what's next for Anna?
Yeah, so we are going to take our senior managers, so that's directors and director generals, on what we call Leadership Circle. It's something we do twice a year, whereby we provide a speaker or a panel discussion on very relevant topics, but that senior managers typically don't really have the time to talk about on their daily life or daily work. So this time we're going to focus on megatrends, foresight, and how that impacts them and their working life. So that would be, for example, the demographic challenges that we have, migration, the aging population, and intergenerational gaps that we have in the workplace, geopolitical situation and how that impacts them and us. It could also be quite practically how we need to restructure and change the way our organizations are done, are established, so that we can be a little bit more agile in meeting those challenges. So really have structured conversations about that among peers, and to see, going back to what we said in the beginning, I mean, we are here to serve the citizens, and how can those challenges be met so that in the end, there is an added value for Europe and for its population. That is purpose-driven leadership, in the making.
Right. So this has been a fascinating conversation, and some of our listeners out there are probably wondering how they could contact you, Anna, and maybe on a professional level, and maybe even share their own experience or get some more depth on some of the things you shared here today. I guess is LinkedIn one of the options? Is that where you prefer people to contact you professionally?
They can contact me via LinkedIn. They can otherwise write me an email. My address, I'm sure they can find on Google.
All right.
But yes, LinkedIn is good. Otherwise, we have a profile both from the school site, and I obviously have a profile there myself.
Okay. So as ever, thanks, Anna, for sharing your insights, tips, and wisdom with our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jerry.
Coming up on Leading People.
My book is a combination of business strategy meets behavioral economics meets the future of work. So that's in this intersection. So there is actually a lot about business strategy. There is a lot about behavioral economics. What motivates people, especially what motivates them beyond money. And then there is a lot about technology. So how can our technology help in humanizing work?
In our next episode, Stefan Meyer, a renowned behavioral economist and professor at Columbia Business School, shares how his new book, The Employee Advantage, challenges conventional thinking about workplace engagement. Stefan reveals how businesses can thrive by putting employees first and balancing the human-machine equation. Don't miss this insightful conversation about the future of work and what it means for leaders everywhere. Until then.